The cold open. Imagine you're standing in front of a crowd. Your hands are clammy, your pulse is racing, and your stomach feels like it's doing flips. Every inch of your body is screaming with anxiety. You feel like everyone in the room can see every bead of sweat on your forehead, hear the slight tremor in your voice, or notice how your face flushes with panic. But then as you scan the room, you realize that everyone is looking at you, like they're not looking at you at all. No one is showing the faintest sign of knowing that inside, you feel like you're about to crumble. You feel exposed, vulnerable. But is anyone else truly aware of how much you're struggling? The answer might surprise you. Why is it that when we're in the grip of intense emotions like fear, anxiety, or nervousness, we feel as though everyone around us can see exactly what's happening inside our minds? The phenomenon that creates this illusion is called the illusion of transparency. It's a psychological distortion that makes us believe our internal states, like nervousness or guilt, are more obvious to others than they really are. But if this illusion is so persistent, how can we trust our own perceptions? Why does our mind trick us into believing that others can read us like an open book? The disturbing history. The illusion of transparency may seem like a modern psychological quirk, but this belief has roots stretching back centuries. In fact, humans have always feared being exposed for their innermost thoughts and emotions. In ancient Greece, philosophers like Socrates explored the connection between mind and body, acknowledging that our emotions could be expressed physically. These early musings set the foundation for understanding how emotional states manifest outwardly, be it through blushing, sweating, or trembling. As societies grew, so did the pressure to mask vulnerability. From Shakespeare's Macbeth to the high courts of medieval Europe, where false accusations of guilt often led to public humiliation, the fear of being seen as weak, scared, or vulnerable has plagued human beings throughout history. Fast forward to the 20th century, and psychological research began to formally explore these ideas. Researchers like William James and Sigmund Freud acknowledged how internal psychological states might leak out through facial expressions, body language, and voice. But as our understanding of the human mind advanced, so did the recognition that the perception of others' ability to see our vulnerability is often vastly overstated. This paradox, where we feel exposed but others remain oblivious, has driven countless psychological studies, all aimed at understanding why we believe our emotions are more visible than they truly are. The scientific explanation and symptoms. At its core, the illusion of transparency arises from a fundamental cognitive bias, the overestimation of how much others notice about our emotional states. It's a form of egocentrism, where we assume that our inner experiences are as obvious to others as they are to us. This happens because our own emotional experiences are vivid and intense. We're deeply aware of the rapid heartbeat, the dry mouth, or the tension in our muscles when we're nervous. However, these internal sensations don't always manifest outwardly in ways others can detect. In fact, scientific studies have consistently shown that most people are terrible at detecting emotional states in others, especially if they aren't actively looking for clues. A 2003 study by researchers at Princeton found that participants who were asked to deliver a public speech consistently overestimated how much their anxiety was visible to others. They believed their nervousness was written all over their faces, yet when asked to rate the speaker's anxiety, observers noted little to no signs of distress. This misperception extends beyond public speaking. Whether it's a social gathering, a job interview, or a first date, the feeling of being judged or scrutinized often exists only in our heads. There's also an interesting neurological component at play. The mirror neuron system in the brain allows us to empathize with others, meaning we can often pick up on subtle cues like a furrowed brow or a nervous laugh. But in moments of stress, we become hyper-aware of our own internal signals and lose sight of the broader picture. Our brains become overloaded, amplifying every tiny physical symptom of anxiety, like a shaky hand or a racing heart, into something we believe is glaringly obvious. In contrast, the people around us are focused on their own thoughts, not on scanning us for signs of nervousness. As a result, the discomfort we feel becomes magnified in our minds while others remain blissfully unaware. Famous real-world case study. One of the most famous studies to investigate the illusion of transparency was led by Princeton psychologists in the early 2000s. Participants were asked to prepare for and deliver a short speech, and their physical and emotional states were monitored throughout the process. Afterward, they were asked how much they thought their anxiety was visible to the audience. On average, the participants believed their anxiety was highly apparent, almost to the point of embarrassing others. But when independent observers who had no prior knowledge of the speakers were asked to rate how anxious the speakers appeared, they found no significant signs of distress. This study is just one of many that have consistently demonstrated how we overestimate the visibility of our anxiety. The fear of judgment and the fear of being read by others can have a profound impact on our mental state, reinforcing the cycle of self-doubt and insecurity. The same effect can be observed in social anxiety, where individuals are often hyper-aware of their bodily sensations and interpret them as glaring signs of nervousness. But even in highly stressful situations like speaking in public or meeting new people, most of the anxiety signals are subtle and difficult to detect. The twist application. Now that you understand how the illusion of transparency operates, think about the last time you entered a social situation and felt certain that everyone was focused on your every move. Maybe you thought your hands were shaking, or you were convinced that your voice was cracking. But in reality, most people weren't paying attention to you at all. They were likely preoccupied with their own worries or anxieties. The truth is, we all walk around with our own version of the illusion of transparency, thinking that our internal states are far more obvious to others than they actually are. Next time you feel those familiar signs of nervousness, sweaty palms, racing heartbeat, take a deep breath and remind yourself, they can't see what I'm feeling. It's a small but powerful realization that can help you break free from the cycle of self-doubt. If no one can see your fear, what else are we misjudging in our social lives? The illusion of transparency is just one example of how our minds trick us into thinking the spotlight is always on us. Our minds are filled with cognitive biases that distort our perceptions of how others see us. For instance, the Barnum effect makes us believe vague, general statements are tailored to us, while the spotlight effect amplifies our feelings of being the center of attention. We often think people notice every small flaw or mistake, but in reality, most are too focused on their own lives to scrutinize ours. These biases feed each other, creating a cycle of self-doubt. The more we overestimate how much others perceive us, the more insecure we become. But the truth is, people are not as aware of us as we think. Understanding these cognitive distortions can help us break free from unnecessary anxiety. The world isn't watching us as closely as we imagine. What other biases influence how we interact with the world? And how can we free ourselves from them? Stay tuned for the next video, where we explore more psychological phenomena that shape our reality. And that is why you need to watch the next videos.